Let me start off by saying that I don't live in a very nice area. I also happen to be a college student. Yeah, I know. The joke writes itself. And, even better, it's my income alone keeping everything in my life together to boot. My parents died in a car crash when I was a kid, and my aunt died from brain cancer as I was finishing up high school. Now, it's just me. But I digress. The area I live in is unfortunate, if you want to be polite. Downright miserable, if you want to be honest. It creeps into view at the very edge of an already small town. It's overgrown, blessed with spotty electricity, and, frankly, quite abandoned looking. Much of it is bound by a cliff overlooking dense, impenetrable forests far, far below. The only link my neighborhood has to the rest of town, and therefore the outside world, is through a bridge. Apparently this was not always the case. Some 50 or so years ago, the town was all in one piece, until an earthquake worked its magic. I learned about this in school during a brief unit covering the history of our small town. That should give you an idea about how little there is to talk about here. Where I'm going with this is, well, I'll put it bluntly. I've always hated that damn bridge. Though our town is over 100 years old and the concrete bridge must be only half its age, the scarred, dusty thing looks like it has been there for centuries at least. If not for the bridge, the vast ravine beneath it would be, most likely, totally insurmountable. If only. It really would have been for the best. The rushing water at the bottom of the ravine runs dark and shiny like pitch, and I always try not to look down at it too closely because it makes me so nervous. Yeah, I know. I sound like quite the anxious type, but I'm telling you, if you were there in person, you'd agree that the bridge looks creepy as hell. The concrete is cracked, the railings rusty and dirty looking. Frail weeds seem to gasp for air as they push through lesions in the sidewalk. The lampposts lining the structure are still as cobwebby as ever and flicker far too much for my taste. As it is, the bridge looks diseased and hollowed out by time. Like a ghost of its former self, riddled with plague and age beyond the point of recovery. At the time of the events I intend to describe, I often found myself thinking that all I needed it to do was to simply die already, snapping in half like a toothpick and plummeting in broken bone pieces down, down, down into the rushing abyss below. And even though you could drive across the bridge, I almost never saw any cars there. Except that one time. The night my parents died, after a car swerved into us as we were passing over the bridge. All I could think about as I waited and prayed for emergency services to arrive was that my mom and dad had been killed before my very eyes. It played over and over and over again in my head in a never-ending loop. The flashing light, the great big shadow of the incoming car, the impact, the explosion, the screaming. I think they died instantly from the head-on collision. That's what I faintly recall being told, anyway. I prayed they were right because when the emergency services carved my mom and dad from the wreckage, they looked so mangled that I barely recognized them at all. I couldn't even look at the other car as they shuffled out the 2 other passengers and body bags. The death of my parents left me alone and completely shattered, stuck in the hospital until I reluctantly made my recovery. The congratulations on my discharge felt meaningless then because even though the doctors had glued the brittle framework of who I was back into shape upon their shiny surgery tables with their magic instruments and practical hands, I knew things would never be the same again. Maybe they forgot a piece, sweeping the abandoned shard into one of their red plastic biohazard containers, leaving me broken in 2 for the rest of my life. Maybe their degrees told them that I did not need it anymore. My aunt was the only one who did not try to comfort me with sweet words and impossible promises. She simply hugged me when we finally left the hospital. And after that, we never once acknowledged the topic of my parents or their deaths again. I'm not in such a desolate condition anymore, but at the time it was unbearably difficult. On some days, even breathing was a struggle. So, yes, like I said, I basically never saw any cars on that bridge. It's true. Even the bus never traveled there. It always stopped just out of sight of the decrepit concrete behemoth, almost like it was terrified of the accursed thing. It seems that even the bus, with its imposing size and frame of steel, expected me to fight the battle of inflowing memories all on my own. As I got older, nothing changed. Rain or shine, night or day, I'd almost always have to cross the bridge alone. Sometimes Hannah, my friend since early childhood, would come with me, but as I got older, I tried keeping her away from the bridge and that part of town. I played up the getting better act because, despite her being the ray of sunlight in my life that she was, even she faltered before scampering across the bridge in a game of race. She hit it well, but I knew she always raced me only because she also felt the miasma looming and curdling about the bridge, souring the air and tinging it with a foul taste reminiscent of spoiling milk. The sick feeling hanging around that place made even her flame gutter. And if she was bothered by the bridge, then the rest of the town seemed petrified by it. The kids especially. The bolder, louder ones liked to send one another on dares across the bridge, but even that was uncommon. As a general rule, no one wanted to go near it. My parents' deaths upon the bridge were the final nails in the coffin of its sinister history. A history of collapses, hits and runs, and even a couple murders. Over the course of my childhood, the bridge's official name appeared to have been finally forgotten for good. It became basically exclusively, and for me, painfully, known by its old, morbid moniker. Butcher's Bridge. Not very savory at all, huh? No matter how much I tried to keep Hannah away from that soul-sucking, life-bleaching part of town, though, in the end, her spirit appeared to be inextinguishable. In time, Hannah became a staple of my household, popping up every few days or so for a visit. After we started college and I met Hannah's boyfriend, he too began tagging along, making for reserved but mellow company. Sweet as honey and warm as sunshine. Yep, that was my dear Hannah, all right. But of course, nothing lasts forever. One day, the dam burst at last. It was a chilly evening. Even the sun seemed distant and cold, its rays watered down by the autumn atmosphere. I was heading home from my local community college on the last bus of the day, once again stewing in the regret of not having been able to get into a school further away from here, one that would permit me to turn my back on this place and leave without looking back. Simultaneously, I tried not to think about how I didn't have the money even to move across town, let alone to go somewhere else entirely. To help myself avoid this depressing train of thought, I talked on the phone with Hannah, who was busy prepping tomorrow's lunch for herself and her boyfriend. Her hands may have been busy, but she was energetic as ever and had some time to talk. Though I distracted myself with a call and prayed like I always did that the bus, for once, would change its mind and finally cross the bridge for me, the bus stopped near the structure at about 5:50 p.m., like it always did. I sighed, reluctantly stepped out, and began to trudge in the direction of my apartment. The sun was already slipping behind the tree line, making way for the incoming frigid night. "Are you almost home?" Hannah asked conversationally as I rounded the corner near the bus stop. I could hear the bubble of water and clinking of kitchenware in the background as she bustled about her tidy, well-lit kitchen. "Yeah, just..." I was about to mention the bridge, but decided to hold my tongue. I try not to bring it up if I could help it. "Just getting off the bus now." Man, I'm so tired. I bet whatever you're cooking tastes great. I'm so jealous. I can almost smell it through the phone. "Well, maybe that's your cue to come see me soon. I get so lonely, you know?" Hannah teased. "And to answer your implied question, I'm making lasagna. So you're really missing out." Damn, that's cold. And you're forgetting Kieran just like that? Seriously, you're brutal. What is he, chopped liver? Kieran is Hannah's boyfriend. No way! Hannah retorted playfully. Her voice slipped into a tone of mock solemnity, dropping to a half-whisper, as if she was about to share a big secret. "You really shouldn't worry about Kieran. He has his uses, like being my personal hand and foot warmer." Wow, was all I could say. In the background, I heard Kieran grumble.
"Your personal hand and foot warmer? Don't forget your personal draft horse, personal stepladder, and oh right, everything else in between. Look, even Evelyn is at a loss for words."
I snorted in amusement, delighted by Kieran's lighthearted and unexpected contribution. He really didn't talk much at all, usually. I heard Hannah's tinkling laugh on the other end, but my mirth abruptly vanished as I glanced up and realized I was face to face with the bridge. I made this trek basically every day, but somehow I could never get accustomed to it, even so many years later. Even numbness would have been preferable to this. At this point, the sun bade its final farewell to the world, stroking my face with a golden ray for the last time before, at long last, completely sinking out of sight. The air grew colder. Somewhat shakily, I took my first step onto the bridge, steeling myself as best as I could. I felt childish to some extent, but the anxiety was undeniable for me. I took a few deep breaths and began to walk, focusing on my feet almost to the point of tunnel vision.
Evelyn? Evelyn, you there?
Hannah's worried voice pierced through the mist surrounding my mind so suddenly that I nearly dropped the phone. Oh, yeah, my bad. Sorry, I zoned out for a second. Hannah hesitated for a moment. I heard her put something down.
You're on that bridge right now, aren't you?
She asked quietly, her voice almost frail. Somehow this question disarmed me enough to render me speechless for a moment. I struggled for a few seconds to come up with a response. Well, I mean, it's not like I can fly over to the other side, Hannah. Gotta take the slow way across. You know how it is. Even as I joked, I tried to ignore the weakness in my legs. I looked down for a moment as I felt a tug on my shoe and stepped around a scraggly-looking branch. Unless you know of a way to do that, in which case I'm all ears. Otherwise, I'm as dependent on the bridge as I'll ever be. Hannah let out a tense laugh.
Very funny, Evelyn.
Damn Freudian slip. I mean, look, Hannah, I'm doing fine, just... I moved to push my hair out of my eyes with my free hand, but stopped. I looked up. The world, to my shock, was whiter than a sheet of paper. It was as if a fog machine had exploded somewhere in the vicinity, spewing so much fog that in the span of what felt like only a few moments, it managed to settle over the entire area completely, like an impenetrable dome. Before me, the lampposts on the bridge lit up simultaneously, floating like shivering, ghostly orbs in the nothingness. I stuck out a trembling hand into the mist, and it vanished up to the wrist immediately. As the fog crept in closer, my body began to feel cold as ice. What the f... I sputtered. I'd only been on the bridge for less than a minute, so how could...
Evelyn, are you okay?
Hannah's voice cut through my panic like a flare through darkness. I swallowed, composing myself. Yeah, but... It's... Hannah, is spontaneous fog a thing? I literally can't see anything in front of my face right now. As I spoke, my weak-willed composure began to crack. Something felt horribly wrong. Hannah began to respond, sounding confused and concerned, but the line started growing fuzzy and earnest, and all I made out was,
What are you talking about? The bridge?
Without warning, all of the lamppost lights blew out simultaneously. I yipped pathetically as I was plunged into total, suffocating white, shielding my face and head from the tinkling rain of glass. Darkness seemed to rapidly encroach upon the bridge, even as the fog grew thicker by the minute. My outdated phone was useless. I cursed under my breath as I frantically tried and failed to cut through the mist with the weak light of my screen. Briefly, all was silent except for the river and the whisper of the wind in the distant trees. Even the phone line seemed to go dead. I struggled to draw breath. Just as I was about to scream, in the distance, a A single lamppost began flickering back to life. It was strange and inexplicable, and somehow filled me with a soul-crushing dread. I watched the light wheeze as it returned to only half of its already paltry former strength, weakly pushing back against the suffocating fog. Hannah! Something in me was drowning in unbridled panic. I nearly bit my own tongue as I borderline shrieked into the phone. Hannah, can you hear me?
Coming. Whatever you do, the side of the bridge.
I looked down at my screen and my hands turned clammy. Call dropped. I had no service. I know this might sound overwhelmingly stupid. I mean, the whole situation was just some random fog, and just a random call drop, and just some random broken streetlights, and I knew the route home anyway, so what was the problem, really? But I mean it when I say that something felt horrifically off. Hot and cold flashes rolled over my body in waves as I stared into the whiteness and at the ominous light, unable to move even a muscle. That's when I saw it. Something was beginning to take shape in the mist, as if someone was sketching it onto the blank canvas of the fog in real-time watercolor. As I watched, frozen, I realized that the figure wasn't just materializing before me. It was walking towards me, too. Stumbling towards me, more accurately. Somehow, my legs moved on their own. My steps were small and weak, but I told myself that I'd only gone about a third of the way down the bridge and could still hightail it out of there as long as I tried to move. All I had to do was keep quiet and... The noise punctured my thinly veiled terror like wet tissue paper. I slowly looked down at my feet. It was a pointless gesture because I couldn't see anything anyway, and I already knew exactly what I'd stepped on. That stupid branch I'd caught my foot on earlier. I looked up excruciatingly slowly, my body more rigid than petrified wood. The figure had stopped, but that was no consolation because it was now much closer, its outline still faint, but much more defined than before. Even the fog seemed to scatter around it, as if terrified of making contact with it. It looked wrong. As I choked on air, I began to hear a broken wheezing coming from the shape. It started advancing towards me once more. I felt hysteria begin to bubble up in the back of my throat. I didn't know if I was about to laugh or cry, but within the next moment the tears won out and began to course down my cheeks. Please, I blubbered. Snot was already starting to run from my nose. Don't. I didn't mean... I was so worked up by this point that even uttering a simple sentence was completely beyond my capabilities. The world seemed to be warping in a nauseating cycle of expansion and contraction, first tunneling down to pinprick-sized proportions, and then ballooning outwards in a manner that made me wonder if I was looking through a distorted fisheye lens. In, out. First, my head felt lighter than a feather, and then became as heavy as a bowling ball, and I clutched at it with sweaty hands, terrified that it would slip off my neck and shatter upon the ground like an overripe watermelon. I tried to keep moving away, but my dizziness slowed me down. It was all I could do, not to fall. I somehow found and grabbed onto the rusty railing on my right as the world tipped around me. I suddenly realized that I was not getting off this bridge. The figure gasped. It was too much. The ground lurched out from under me one final time. My vision dimmed, and everything went black. Evelyn, can you hear me? The voice dragged me to the surface of my consciousness slowly but surely. It sounded familiar, and as I lay in the darkness and hazily wondered who it could be, the answer came to me with unexpected clarity. Hannah. I cracked open my eyes a fraction and was unable to stifle a faint moan of pain. I immediately closed them again. My entire head felt like one giant, inflamed nerve ending, and every movement, no matter how minute, set it mercilessly ablaze. I muttered. I was trying to ask, what happened? But I couldn't even make it past the first word. My mouth was sticky and dry and tasted foul. Shh. Hannah shushed me, her voice uncharacteristically soft and serious. She stroked my cheek with fingers as light and gentle as a summer breeze. You're okay. Just focus on not moving for now. She began to fuss around me, and in the meantime, another pair of footsteps approached the two of us. Hannah started speaking in a hushed voice with a new person. I was too woozy to make out what she was saying, but when the stranger replied to her, I immediately recognized the sonorous, yet musical voice. It was Kieran. As I lay there and tried not to move, the two seemed to reach some sort of agreement. We're going to take you to the hospital, Lynn, Hannah informed me in a whisper. I opened my mouth to protest, but she cut me off. Don't even try. You look like you've had a nasty fall, and Kieran and I want to make sure you're okay. We're not going to leave you here, okay? I was silent, and Hannah took that as a sign of agreement. Really, I couldn't have argued if I tried with the state I was in, so I reluctantly let her go. We're going to put you as carefully as we can into the car, and then take you to the hospital to get you checked. We will have to lift you, but we'll try to be as gentle as possible. Kieran will have to help me. Are you okay with that? The question was redundant, but I appreciated her asking me anyway. I didn't want to risk myself more pain by saying anything too complicated, so I breathed out a barely audible yes. Truthfully, I still wanted to tell Hannah to relax a bit and let me deal with this on my own, but considering my state, such a request was ludicrous. And so I held my peace. Okay, Hannah exhaled, determined. Kieran, please help me. Within a few seconds, I felt two large hands slide under my back and legs. Kieran! Hannah protested quietly but indignantly.
It's okay, Hannah.
Kieran murmured.
I've got it. Don't worry.
He lifted me gently from the ground as if I weighed no more than a ragdoll. Then, he began to step measuredly in what I assumed was the direction of his car. Though his pace was almost aggravatingly slow, I still felt grateful for it, as I knew he was doing it for my sake. I heard the sound of the car's doors being opened, courtesy of Hannah, probably, and I tried not to wince as Kieran laid me delicately into the back seat.
Hannah, you should stay with Evelyn in the back,
he suggested.
I'll drive.
But
Someone needs to keep her steady while we drive. Better you than me. I'll go real slow.
It occurred to me then, for whatever reason, that in the many months Hannah had been seeing Kieran, this was only my second time hearing him utter more than just a few words in one go. I exhaled slightly in amusement and immediately regretted it as my head throbbed in response. I found I could barely remember who I was, let alone what had happened. Hannah slid in next to me and delicately balanced my head on her lap. She smoothed my hair as Kieran started the car, and then gently cupped my face to keep my head from rolling as we began to move. My mind wandered in strange circles as it failed to recollect the previous hour's events, and I found myself hazily reflecting on Hannah's relationship with Kieran instead. About 3 years ago, blushing so fiercely that she put tomatoes to shame, Hannah told me about her long-growing feelings for Kieran. At the time, he was a classmate of hers in an art class she was taking. A few months later, Hannah insisted I meet him personally. Despite my protests that my opinion was irrelevant, she stood firm, saying that she wanted my approval first and foremost. I recalled my shock upon seeing him for the first time. From her description of his character and what I'd seen of his sensitively painted artwork, I expected a delicate, almost frail boy, not much taller than the tiny Hannah herself. Instead, before me stood a hulking giant at least 6.5 feet tall, with dark hair and large black studs in his ears. He had a few ebony-colored rings on his tan fingers, and the thin, form-fitting, long-sleeved shirt he was wearing under his neat wool coat made no secret of the fact that he was someone not to be messed with. By all accounts, I was floored, and my guard immediately went up. But as I looked from his surprisingly nervous expression to Hannah's own of trepidation, and as Kieran extended a faintly trembling hand in greeting and shook my own gently, the anxiety in my heart unexpectedly eased, and I accepted him fully. First impressions aside, there was something warm and nurturing about him. What exactly this observation was based on, I wasn't sure, but because of it, I was certain beyond a shadow of a doubt that this was the kind of beautiful person Hannah was meant to be with. As I drifted off, I reflected on my feelings on the matter. I was so happy for Hannah. Someone like her deserved only the best. If only I couldn't finish the thought. Instead, darkness enveloped me once more. Thankfully, my injury wasn't super serious. I was slightly concussed and had scraped myself up a little, but after keeping me under observation for some time, the hospital let me go with directions to not overexert myself for a while. While I was still in care, Hannah tried to ask me about what had happened on the bridge, but I developed a headache, and so she concluded that it would be better for us to breach this topic later. Though I put up a good fight, she insisted on helping out around the apartment until I was fully back to normal. On occasion, Kieran would tag along with Hannah. Usually he busied himself with cooking restaurant-grade meals, which were so good and, frankly, beautifully arranged, that I ate them almost regretfully. Though I did not want Hannah, or Kieran, to waste time on me, I was still grateful for the opportunity to spend some extra moments of the day with both of them. Especially Hannah, of course. My memories came back slowly and agonizingly. and I dreaded the moment when Hannah would ask me again to explain everything. Unfortunately, the day seemed to arrive quicker than I could prepare myself. It was late afternoon. The sun was slanting in brilliant sheets through the narrow windows of the compact, musty space that only very generously could be referred to as the dining room. Hannah had just steeped some peppermint tea, passing me a mug of it. Now, she was standing with her back to me as she brewed another portion for herself. "So, what happened on the bridge?" The question came so unexpectedly that I hiccuped, but the atmosphere was solemn, and neither one of us laughed. I knew I'd been stalling for a while now, and that the conversation was inevitable, but I still felt a deep sense of impending doom. I gripped my mug so tightly between my hands that I couldn't help but wonder, offhandedly, how it was possible that it didn't crack between my fingers. If only I... The same thought from the day of the incident began to formulate in my head again, but it was unfinished and vague, so all I said was, "I don't really want to talk about it."
I know, Lynn.
Hannah replied in a soft voice, walking back with her mug to the table. She set it down carefully on a coaster and unhooked my hands from around my mug, taking them into her own.
But you're my friend. I mean, we've known each other for like years. You know you can tell me anything.
I looked up at her. The sincerity in her emerald green eyes gripped my heart in a guilty vise. I knew she was not trying to make me feel this way, but I felt terrible. Unbidden, tears pooled at the corners of my eyes and spilled over, coursing down my cheeks. "It's not really that I don't want to," I whispered. I can't. It'll ruin everything. You'll never be able to see me the same way again." Hannah looked confused and concerned.
You're not making any sense, Lynn. How does you collapsing on a bridge ruin everything?
I bit my lip. A moment of silence passed. Then, Hannah spoke quietly again.
Are you not telling me something?
I felt my teeth sink deeper into thin skin. The taste of blood bloomed in my mouth. If only The thought was solidifying out of the fog lurking in the back of my mind, precipitating into words, a concrete expression of feeling. If only I could. Hannah sighed.
Lynn, I'm not trying to pressure you, and you don't have to answer, but I'm just trying to...
If only I could do this on my own. I made my choice in that split second. "Stop it, Hannah," I murmured. I closed my eyes, staunching the tears. Just stop. In that moment, I realized that I couldn't do it anymore. I was sick of answering questions, sick of pretending to be okay, sick of being the fragile little orphan whose feelings everyone had to tiptoe around.
What?
I said stop it! An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. I glanced up, very briefly, and wished I hadn't. Hannah's eyes glistened, and she struggled to keep her composure. Incredibly, I felt even more guilty. Sure, I had my feelings, but Hannah had been taking care of me all this time. Not just as of late, but for years. visiting me constantly, helping me keep the apartment in better shape than I ever could manage on my own, crossing that damn bridge with me even though she also feared it. Yeah. The bridge. It was always that horrible bridge. I hated her using it when I was younger. Now, I couldn't have her anywhere near it. It simply was not safe. I tamped down my feelings. I had to think of the bigger picture. Forget everything. For the sake of keeping Hannah safe, it was better that I dealt with that wretched thing on my own. I steeled myself and, through gritted teeth, said in a clear but strained voice, "Thank you, Hannah, for everything. But you need to go. Please." Hannah quietly disengaged her hands from mine. She silently slid her coat from the back of her chair, then padded into the entryway. After a few moments of shuffling, I heard the final soft click of the door. Hannah was gone. Things got worse after that. It wasn't just Hannah's absence that made everything unbearable. It was more like, unbeknownst to me, the whole world had been boiling beneath the surface for years, and had finally started to bubble over, catching me entirely off guard. I started hearing voices in my apartment. At first, they were only faint murmurs bound by the shadows of dark corners, but eventually, they grew bolder. They snaked their slippery selves about my neck and seemed to tighten like nooses. They chanted and mumbled gibberish into my ear that I could never recall, let alone decipher after the fact. Then, I broke all the mirrors in my house. It was an impulsive and stupid gesture that left me with painful gashes on my hands and feet. But after I saw the shadows looming behind the glass and dripping off my shoulders and found I could not swat them away, I decided that I'd rather not see anything at all. Better steep myself in the fog of ignorance than go mad from knowing. I stopped going outside, too. And of course, throughout all this time, Hannah never visited again. The apartment fell into abject disrepair very quickly after she left that day. Broken glass and spilled rice on the floor. Slimy mold in the sink. Cobwebs slipping off the ceiling like spindly clumps of feathery down that settled into my hair, sticky and persistent. Grime everywhere, really. It was unbearably disgusting, but all I could do was cower under my filthy, sweaty blankets and pretend that all of it was just a dream. Just a nightmare. Not much I could do about the shrieking and pounding on the front door, anyway. Or the door of my bedroom, soon enough. Or the choruses of moans and wails that started up one night in the shadows of my apartment and never stopped after that. I debated calling emergency services on numerous occasions, but in the early days, every time I tried, my phone had no reception or would drop the call mid-dial. I ended up flinging it against the wall of my bedroom, cracking the screen. The landline wouldn't work either. In fact, the landline was incomparably worse. There was a reason that I tried to use it only twice. The first time, what started off as a normal emergency phone call, considering the circumstances, quickly devolved into indescribable chaos, with the operator on the other end roaring with hysterical laughter and then hissing at me with serpentine tongues. They berated me endlessly, and, unable to take it anymore, I quickly hung up. The second call led to a similar result, but that time, setting down the receiver did not stop the screaming from filling the room. I pulverized the phone and ripped its cable out of the socket to make it stop. I never called Hannah. I didn't want to hear her lovely voice warped by the sick reality I was trapped in. At some point, I began to grow numb to the constant tear. And after the cracks began spidering their way through the dusty pane of my bedroom window, things got really bad. Something putrid smashed its way through the glass one night, smelling like death and maggots and rotten flies. I screamed like a little girl and sprinted through the apartment in blind terror, forgetting about the voices waiting for me on the other side of the door. The miasma ballooned its way through the house, following me and coating everything it touched in a thick layer of greasy, foul musk. The howling rose to fever pitch. I found myself trapped in the entranceway and ended up taking a leap of faith, bursting outside at last and flying down the stairs and out the apartment lobby's door. I froze as I crashed out into the outside world. It was white all over again, just like it had been that dreadful evening. And it was dead silent. All except for the unforgiving click of the lock on the lobby's door. Of course, I had forgotten my goddamn keys in the house. And now, I was trapped outside. Strangely, the miasma that had chased me earlier was nowhere in sight. And yet, somehow, the fog was unimaginably worse. I listened for anything at all, but not a sound cut through the curtains of mist. No hoarsely singing birds. No rustling of sickly trees. Not even the rush of the pitch-black river far below at the bottom of the nearby ravine. Tears spilled down my cheeks. I knew then that there was nowhere to run anymore. It was always that damn bridge, this entire goddamn time. It had lured me out, and now I was done for good.
What do you want?
I screamed into the fog.
Haven't you taken enough from me? Haven't you tortured me enough? All you've ever done is take. What more could you possibly want when I have nothing else to give you?
No response. Just muffled silence. And then, in the distance, a string of flickering lights came to life. How I hated that bridge. I decided that I was sick of it all. If it wanted to kill me, to finally cut me from the world after taking everything it possibly could, then so be it. I was sick of living, sick of the everyday agony and suffering, Sick of having to pretend I was fine when really, all I wanted to do on the inside was scream. I'd give it what it wanted. Just this once. Just this once. If it meant I could finally be at peace. And so, I trudged towards the bridge for the final time. Of course, the fog did not let up once I stepped foot on the bridge. Instead, it only seemed to thicken, forming an impenetrable wall of white behind me. I winced as my bruised and scraped feet made contact with the worn cement. I kept walking, trying to keep my hands from shaking. My cracked lips started to bleed again as I began to chew on them, ignoring the fact that they weren't fully healed yet. I stopped walking once I'd gotten to what I guessed was the middle of the bridge. I didn't have the strength to go any further. I simply sunk to the ground and waited. Just like last time. Without warning, all the lights on the bridge blew out. And just like last time, in a few moments, just one lamppost came back to life. Invisible hands began to spin the dark figure out of the white wool mist once more. I watched numbly as it took shape, the threads of its being knitting themselves into the dreaded and recognizable silhouette. Too quickly, it seemed to be done, but I still could not make it out clearly. Nothing stirred. At last, it croaked. It took its first step towards me. I squeezed my eyes shut. Just kill me already. The resolve in my voice shocked me. If you want me to die so badly, so be it. I've nothing left anyway. Just do it fast, because I've had enough. Silence blanketed the bridge once more, broken only by both my and the figure's wheezing breaths. And then, the figure collapsed on top of me. I shrieked, forgetting all my bravado, and flung the body off of me, scrabbling back on my hands and backside. I didn't have the strength to stand up, so once I'd stopped flailing, I sat there on the cold ground, panting, too weak to move any further, but too overrun with adrenaline to give up entirely. I suppose I wasn't all that brave in the moment after all, whether in greeting or fighting death. The figure spoke again. The words slowly began to take shape. I was frozen. I couldn't understand what was going on. All I could hear now was my own ragged breathing and the moans of the figure before me. Then, for some inexplicable reason, my body moved on its own, without the direction of my mind. I crept towards the little body on my hands and knees, shaking so much that my limbs nearly buckled beneath me. At first, I could barely make out what I was looking at. No. Who I was looking at. Suddenly, it dawned on me. I realized I was looking at a child. A broken-looking, suffering child, probably no more than 6 years old at the most, lying limply on the cold concrete like a marionette with cut strings. I couldn't see the child's face, but I was sure that I was looking at a little girl. A memory resurfaced in that moment. A memory of the terrified, innocent eyes in the other backseat, coming closer and closer, separated by the 2 windshields of the cars. I began to cry again, my throat rasping painfully with every sob.
I'm sorry.
I wept.
I'm so sorry. I couldn't.
I covered the girl's hand with my trembling own. There was nothing I could do. Not now. Not then. Not then, when I'd climbed my way through the wreckage and broken window of the obliterated car. Not then, when I'd watched the other car slowly catch fire. Not then, as they wheeled me away, the only one from the crash, still struggling to stay alive. I may have imagined this part, but I think she squeezed my hand back. Her shuddering breathing began to slow. The world flickered as my sight dimmed. I passed out. I woke with the faint threads of my parents' embrace slipping like a cardigan off my shoulders. Their "I love yous" growing distant in the back of my mind. Faint light played across my eyelids, lighting them up from the outside in. I was not in a hospital room, but the air felt vaguely familiar and unfamiliar all at once. Was it?
Lynn?
A hoarse voice brought me to my senses. I cracked open my crusted eyes. Hannah was beside me, biting back tears as she held my feeble hand in the trembling, fragile grip of her own.
How are you feeling?
I tried to grasp her hand a little tighter, to tell her that it was okay. I felt better, somehow. Warmer. Cleaner, too. As clean as the soft blanket I was covered with. Hannah, how could I ever have? I really didn't deserve her at all. Kieran, either. I was too weak to speak yet, so I didn't say anything. I hoped that my gesture was enough to tell her everything that I was feeling right now. Hannah started to cry then, flinging herself about my neck, whispering about how scared she was when she'd found me, all alone, passed out in the middle of the bridge again. I stroked her hair the best I could and looked past her, out the window. In the distance, I could hear the clattering of dishes in the sink. The room was still a little grimy, but it was nice. It was something. And as I held Hannah, I watched the window in the waxing morning. Before my eyes, the bright sunlight began to filter through the fragile pane. Unfettered, by the cracks that ran through it. Hey everyone, Nexia here. Thank you for making it through the entire story and into this section. I appreciate it. Not the longest video in the world, I know, but definitely longer than what I normally upload, and, ooh, scary. It was my own writing, so. If you have any thoughts that you would like to share with me on how the video turned out, most pertinently the story, of course, since that is what is so special about this video, feel free to let me know in the comments. Just, keep it civil. And if you have thoughts on anything else, like the music choices, for example, whatever else may come to mind, feel free to let me know too, and if I see your comment, I will read it. Thank you to Phantom for sticking by me through this process and for being patient with me, even though I delayed uploading this so many times. The fact that it happened, this is now out and you're hearing this is crazy, because I wrote this story over a year ago. It was technically done over a year ago. That's why there's that info dump at the beginning, so don't mention that in your constructive criticism. I know, I'm very aware of that. Thank you. So again, thank you to Phantom for sticking by me, even though it took me a very long time to finish this. I recruited him a good several months ago, maybe half a year or so ago, and he waited patiently until I finished this, and when I asked him to help me with some other stuff or re-record or whatever because so much time had passed, he did that too. So if you're going to write a comment, tell Phantom that he's cool, because he is. Thank you, Phantom. Thank you to my friends who are watching this. You guys know who you are. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time out of your very busy days to listen to this video. Thank you for 100 subscribers. I know to some people it might seem like an inconsequential number, but to me it means a lot. 100 people is a lot of people. So thank you for sticking by with me too through all this time. When I finished this story, you guys were how many? You numbered at 120, now it's past that, way past that, and for that I'm grateful. All of your support has done a lot for me in terms of my motivation to continue uploading, and also just in terms of me knowing that I am doing something entertaining, I guess. Thank you, of course, can't not say thank you to my Patreons for following me off of YouTube and onto Patreon to give their support in whatever way they are able. I'm always grateful to everybody who takes the time to follow me off of YouTube. That is a very big step, that you care. It shows to me that you care a lot about the videos that I make, and for that I'm very appreciative of that. Thank you. Two things I will address really quickly before I wrap this up. I upgraded to a proper recording space, a treated space. So if you're hearing an improvement in terms of how this audio sounds in this part of the video, that is great, because I'll be sounding like this in the future too, as soon as I get through the couple recordings I have that I recorded before I upgraded the setup, the microphone, the space, everything. So that is something to look forward to, and if you can't tell the difference, that is wonderful too. That makes me feel a lot better about my previous setup. Finally, actually, no, before that, I'm gonna go back real quick. The first part, the story part of this video was recorded outside of this space that I'm in now, because I had not had it set up at the time. I only had the new microphone. So actually, if you can tell the difference, let me know. I would be very interested in hearing that. This story, I believe, the way that you can access the printed version of it will be through my Patreon, and it will be paywalled, which is not a stimulant for you to buy it. That's not the purpose of it. It's just because of the issues that I've seen in this community from people copying work, just taking it, and feeding it to generative models, all that kind of stuff. I want to be respectful to the time I put into this because it was a lot of time, and that's how I'm choosing to upload it for now until the situation improves. Anyway, I think that should wrap up this part of the video. If you're still listening, thank you for making it through this too. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one.